The tenant's secret. The house on Willow Street wasn't much to look at. Peeling white paint, crooked shutters, a sagging porch that groaned when Lena set her suitcase down. But the rent was half of what she paid in the city, and she needed a fresh start. When the landlord, Mr. Grayson, handed her the keys, his smile was thin, his eyes avoiding hers. "There's just one rule," he said, voice gravelly. He pointed to a battered wooden door near the kitchen. "The basement stays locked. Off limits." Lena had laughed nervously. "What's down there?" "Buried treasure." "Old junk," he replied too quickly, already turning away. She told herself it was nothing. People had quirks, old houses had quirks. But that first night, when she lay awake listening to the creaks of the unfamiliar home, she realized this house's quirks were different. At 2 in the morning, she heard it. Faint, dragging sounds beneath the floor, slow and deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. Then came a rhythm of footsteps, too even, too measured, as if someone was pacing. She sat up in bed, holding her breath. The sound lasted for nearly an hour, stopping only when she convinced herself it was the plumbing, the old pipes, the house settling. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was walking beneath her. By morning, the air was stale, carrying a metallic temps that made her gag when she passed the vent in the hallway. She lit candles, opened windows, but the smell returned each night. The neighbors weren't much help. When she struck up small talk with the woman next door and casually mentioned the basement, the woman's smile froze. "You'll get used to the house," she said, retreating quickly. Lena was left with the distinct impression that the less she knew, the safer she'd be. Days passed, and the noises grew louder. Sometimes she swore she heard whispers, low, desperate, threading through the floorboards. Other times, it was a faint tapping, like fingernails on wood. The door to the basement unsettled her most. It wasn't just locked, it looked battered. The frame was worn, the edges gouged with long scratch marks. One night she leaned close and thought she heard breathing on the other side, shallow and ragged, as if someone waited inches away. She confronted Mr. Grayson when he came by to drop off paperwork. "I think something's wrong with the basement," she said, choosing her words carefully. "There are noises at night, and the smell." "Pipes," he interrupted, not meeting her eyes. "House is old. Pipes make noise. You'll get used to it." But Lena couldn't. Sleep came only in short bursts, broken by phantom footsteps and the growing dread that someone or something was underneath her. Her breaking point came a week later. At 3 in the morning, she woke to a sound unmistakable this time. Crying. A child sobbing, muffled but clear, drifting up through the vent. She sat frozen, her skin prickling, until it faded into silence. The next day, when she returned from work, she noticed the hinges on the basement door were loose, screws hanging crooked, almost as if the door had been forced inward at some point. Her pulse quickened. Maybe she could finally see for herself what Mr. Grayson was hiding. That evening, with trembling hands, she unscrewed the hinges. The lock still dangled, but the door gave way with a groan. The stench hit her instantly. Rot, mildew, something metallic underneath it all. A damp chill spilled out, curling around her ankles like fog. She clicked on her flashlight and stepped down the creaking stairs. The basement was worse than she imagined. Water stains ran like veins across the walls. Rusting chains dangled from hooks, swaying slightly though there was no breeze. A mattress lay in the corner, dark with old stains. Her flashlight caught the glint of broken glass, a child's toy car, and something that looked disturbingly like a restraint strapped to the floor. Her heart thudded. She moved deeper, drawn to a boarded-up section of wall. The wood was warped, brittle. She pulled at it, each plank groaning until it snapped free. Behind it was a hidden room no bigger than a closet. Inside, scattered across the floor, were dolls' missing eyes, yellowed blankets, and old newspapers. She picked one up, hands shaking. The headline screamed back at her. "Local teens still missing, search continues." The dates were from the 1970s. Dozens of clippings lay in piles, each telling the same story: vanished neighbors, unsolved disappearances. Lena's breath came fast. The room wasn't storage, it was a cell. She staggered back, flashlight beam jerking wildly across the room. That was when she heard footsteps above her, slow, deliberate. Her blood ran cold. She had locked the front door. No one should be here. "Hello." Her voice cracked in the darkness. Silence. Then another step. And another. Her flashlight flickered, plunging her into darkness before flaring back to life. The footsteps stopped. She froze, straining to hear. That's when the basement light overhead buzzed, sputtered, and went out. She was swallowed in pitch black. In the silence, something shifted behind her, close to close. Then came the sound of breathing, slow, rasping, right at her ear. and a whisper so soft she almost thought she imagined it. "You weren't supposed to come down here." The house that watched Thomas Avery had lived on Willow Street for nearly 20 years, long enough to watch the house next door devour tenants like a redditor. Families came, couples came, students came, all of them left. Some packed their things in the middle of the night, never returning for the rest. Others simply vanished, the landlord putting up his for rent sign as if nothing had happened. Thomas never spoke of it openly. People in the neighborhood had an unspoken rule: don't ask questions about the Grayson house. But when Lena moved in, a young woman with a hopeful smile and nervous laugh, Mose felt that old dread rise again. He told himself not to get involved. And yet within weeks he noticed the signs: lights on at all hours, shadows moving behind curtains long after midnight, and the screams muffled, but sharp enough to make his daughter, Emily, wake crying from nightmares. One night, Emily pointed at the basement window as Thomas tucked her into bed. "She's down there again," she whispered. "Who?" Thomas asked, trying to steady his voice. "The pale lady. She was staring at me." His stomach turned cold. That window hadn't been used in years, boarded from the inside. He told Emily she had imagined it, but he barely slept that night, listening to the house groan as though it were alive. By the second month, Lena looked different. Dark circles ringed her eyes, her face thinner, her smile gone. He saw her standing in her doorway once, murmuring to herself in a low voice that didn't sound like her own. When he tried to speak with her, she waved him off. "Just the house, old pipes," she muttered, parroting the same excuse everyone gave. But Thomas knew better. The truth lingered like poison in the neighborhood's history. He remembered the headlines Mr. Grayson's father arrested decades ago. Whispers of people chained in the basement, young runaways, missing kids. The trial had fallen apart. No bodies had ever been found. Some said the old man had hidden them where no one would ever look. Others claimed the house itself had taken them. Now Lena was caught in it too. One evening, unable to ignore his unease, Thomas lingered by the fence. When he saw Lena leaving for work, the basement curtains twitched. He swore he saw a hand press against the glass, long and skeletal, before vanishing. That night, while his wife slept, Thomas sat at the window with the lights off, staring at the house next door. Around 2 in the morning, Lena appeared in her living room, lit by a single lamp. She stood perfectly still, her eyes unfocused. Then she turned, slowly, toward the basement door. She opened it. For nearly an hour, Thomas sat paralyzed as she disappeared into the darkness below. The next day, he gathered the nerve to speak to her again. "You need to leave that house," he urged when she stepped outside to fetch the mail. Her eyes darted around nervously. "It won't let me," she whispered. Then she hurried back inside. That phrase haunted him: "It won't let me." On the following weekend, his worst fears were realized. He awoke to see Lena's front door hanging ajar in the wind. Her car was still in the driveway. Something wasn't right. He told himself not to get involved, but Emily's frightened words echoed in his mind. "The pale lady." Thomas crossed the yard, his flashlight gripped tight. The house swallowed him with its stale air the moment he stepped inside. The silence was suffocating. "Lena," he called. No answer. The basement door stood wide open. Every instinct told him to turn back, but he forced himself down the steps. The smell hit first mildew, rust, and something sweetly rotten. His flashlight beam quivered across the floor, and there she was. Lena sat crouched in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking back and forth. Her lips moved rapidly, muttering strings of words in a voice too deep, too fractured to belong to her. "Lena," he whispered. She stopped. Slowly, her head turned. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, pupils blown wide. A dozen voices seemed to pour from her throat at once, overlapping whispers that clawed at Thomas's sanity. The chains on the wall rattled violently, though untouched. The air grew heavy, pressing in on him from all sides. Thomas stumbled back, his flashlight beam catching the shadows on the wall. They weren't stilled, they stretched and writhed, moving independently of Lena's body, clawing at the air like trapped things desperate for release. He bolted for the stairs, heart hammering, but the basement door slammed above him with a deafening crack. He rammed his shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, Lena's voices grew louder, overlapping in a nightmarish chorus. Some begged, some laughed, some screamed. He turned, and for an instant, he saw them faces in the darkness, pale and hollow-eyed, emerging from the shadows. Children, teenagers, adults, dozens of them, each expression frozen in terror. The truth struck him like ice. These were the missing. The basement wasn't empty, it had never been emptied. And now the house wanted more. Thomas screamed, pounding on the door until his fists bled. The shadows surged, crawling toward him, swallowing the light of his flashlight until he was engulfed. When the landlord returned days later, he didn't look surprised to find the house silent. He replaced the broken lock on the basement door, humming under his breath. By dusk, a new for rent sign stood in the yard, swaying in the evening breeze. From the basement window, pale faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting, and in the darkness below, Lena rocked silently, her lips moving with voices that were no longer her own. The house had claimed them both. It was still hungry.